Lonely This Christmas. A Newton Abbot Saga Christmas audio story. Based on the British Railway series by Simon Martin. Written by Butterfly Coffee. Winter had most of the West Country in its grip. The air was crisp, the skies cloudy and grey, and most of the ground was covered in a thick blanket of frost. A painter or passer-by would have taken the time to admire the scene, but the engines and railwaymen at Newton Abbot couldn't afford to do that. They were slap bang in the middle of the Christmas rush. Christmas post trains passed through almost every other day, and expresses and coal trains were coming through as well. Everything needed to run to time, but a jovial spirit was kept up by all. All that is, but Lizzie. One chilly night, the engines were chatting amongst themselves when the freight engine felt the need to announce something. Bloody winter and Christmas runs do my head in.
Well, I dare say someone's being a bit of a humbug, Louise said after a moment of silence.
Hercule chuckled. Winter's rotting up your frame, Lizzie. Soon you'll never be able to get steam up.
Hey, you button it,
Lizzie grunted. If it weren't for my fire to keep me warm, West Country cold and Christmas work would drive me round the bend. When your fire ain't laid, you're as cold as all heck, and bored with waiting for something to heat you up, even if it's a match. And when you are working, there's nothing but coal runs or post runs to do. Doesn't really take you anywhere, does it?
You only say that because you want to put as much distance between you and the carolers as possible, Julie sniggered. You've made your case very plain on them.
Oh, Struth, don't get me started!
Everyone eventually chatted themselves to sleep, but 4760 was wide awake, a big grin splitting her face. The young Ginty was delighting herself with winter's first snow, giggling under her breath as she watched the fresh flakes descend from the black sky. The next day, Lizzie was resting on platform 9 on the east side of the station, shivering and complaining about the snow and the cold, when the station master approached her, muttering to himself,
"Bloody feet freezing. Blocks of wood, for goodness sakes."
"You mind speaking up there?" Lizzie called bluntly. She didn't appreciate it when people or engines muttered.
"I could just as well not give you another job," the station master snipped. "I could just as well let Mr. Turner do it, but he had to go and get himself cut off in the snow, didn't he?"
Well, it's not like I knew that, sonny, retorted Lizzie. But I digress. What's next on the agenda?
A load of China clay needs taking up north. 4760's sticking it on the back of a coal train now, and everyone else is otherwise engaged, so you're booked to take it.
Righto then, hollered her driver. Let's get you going, Lizzie, old mare. Come on, Jim, he said to the fireman.
Lizzie whooshed a great cloud of steam and moved off the platform. She'd been resting in the wrong direction, though. Newton Abbot may have been a hub, but it only had one small turntable at the back of the workshops, meaning Lizzie had to travel up the line a little ways to get on the right track. By the time the engine and crew had returned, turned around, made a quick stop to have a snowplough fitted, then repeated that same process backwards, the train was 15 minutes behind. 4760 called out to Lizzie as the 43XX was coupled up and waiting for clearance to leave.
"Duchess passed through a short time ago."
"Oh? What'd she have to say for herself then?"
"Apparently the snow gets really bad when you pass Exeter St. David's. Please try to be careful."
Lizzie couldn't help but scoff. "I've been through a hell of a lot more than deep snow, Midlander. I'm not too worried. Besides, I've got me a snowplough, a fire, and determination. That's more than enough to see me through. Ta very much for the concern, though."
The guard's whistle blew, and the green lamp shone, so Lizzie could finally depart.
You never know,
she laughed as she pulled away.
I might just be back in time for Boxing Day.
The Great Western engine gave a hearty blast of her whistle, rattled past Hackney Yard and onto the main line. 4760 watched as the train drifted out of sight. She was worried.
Lizzie will be okay, won't she?
She asked her driver.
What if she doesn't come back for, Boxing Day?
Never you mind about her, smiled the driver. When Lizzie says she knows what she's doing, you just leave her well alone and all will be grand. A valiant engine, that one. He pulled on the reverser and took 4760, still fretting over Lizzie, and wondering what Boxing Day even meant, back out into the snow. Further up the line, the calm of a cool, snowy winter's evening was shattered by the angry bellow of a wronged engine.
Oh, for God's sake!
Lizzie was absolutely fuming. Annoyingly, 4760's warning had been justified. Signals had been set or frozen at danger because of the weather, meaning that the 43XX had arrived at Paddington an hour and a half late. Now, after taking a full 3/4 of an hour longer to just reach Leicester, Lizzie was being told she was being relieved of her train in order to help a stranded engine. She wouldn't have minded this at any other time so much. But it was the middle of the deep dark winter, she was running very late, and she was not on home turf. Leicester was LMS territory, and she'd already been the subject of a few dirty looks, including the one she was getting now from the station master. Lizzie seethed in silence as her crew were briefed and given a clearance to move on. She sat growling at a Midland compound.
What do you want?
For you to go home, you ruffian! Oh, trust me, sunshine.
I don't want to be here either, now sod off!
And the grumpy engine hissed sooty steam at the passenger locomotive, who squealed and scuttled away in horror. Thankfully, Lizzie was on the move a lot sooner than she thought, charging ahead with her lamp aglow and snow spreading before her like an angel's wings as it was pushed away. The rescue went a lot faster than was expected too, with little fuss. Lizzie was kept very warm by her roaring fire and the effort of pulling, and was glad when the engine was freed. As the workmen cleared snow from his wheels and motion, Lizzie asked the engine where his home station was, hoping to bin him there quickly and get back to Newton Abbot before the weather cut her off.
Carlisle,
he shivered. Lizzie swore her eyes nearly popped out.
Carlisle? Sorry, son, but I doubt there's a cat in hell's chance of me getting you up there.
We could try Crewe, said the engine's driver. The workshops there could be ideal if we needed to bunker down when the weather picked up.
Or Nottingham, called the fireman. I used to work engines there, and I don't think it's that far off. If the weather holds, we can make it there easily.
Well, whatever we're doing, let's do it soon, Lizzie's driver replied. If we don't move now, we may not move for another day or so.
Well, as long as I get back on Great Western lines, I shall be just fine.
Lizzie buffered up to the engine and began the journey to Nottingham. Thankfully, the weather held out, and both engines, their crews, and workmen reached their destination as the sun began to rise. Lizzie was glad of a rest, but she was looking forward to getting home. She was starting to get headaches from shooting engines' evil looks when they gawked at her. She also found there was little for her to do, so she soon became stiff, cold, and bored. By midday, however, there was some bad news. Lizzie couldn't go home today. She couldn't go home tomorrow either. Thanks to the worsening West Country weather, she wouldn't be able to get home until Christmas Day had come and gone. The freight engine was cross.
so I have to spend the next few days stuck on a line where everyone hates my boiler tubes?
There's nothing I can do, I'm afraid, the shedmaster told her. We can't find you a clear road, so here you'll have to stay.
LMS over rain and mud any time, Lizzie muttered under her breath, but she still wasn't happy.
Back at Newton Abbot, Mr. Turner was on the telephone to the Nottingham station master. He wasn't pleased that his main freight engine was stuck in the LMS region, and even more so that she couldn't return until the new year at the earliest. He argued bitterly, but it was no good. Lizzie would have to stay where she was. Mr. Turner harumphed and grabbed his scarf, coat, and gloves. The engines were saddened when they heard about Lizzie being stuck in Nottingham.
"How's she gone and gotten herself up there?" asked Hercule. "I was informed that the train was late and the weather delayed her even more. Lizzie was then taken off the train to rescue another engine, and landed herself in Nottingham of all places."
"At least she is at a shed where she is safe and warm," Duchess soothed. "She could be left on a siding in the snow, and that would never do. Nottingham is a lovely place. She'll do just fine there for now."
But it's an LMS place!" Louise burst out. "Brunel knows what Lizzie thinks of that. She'll be spitting feathers at the very thought. I know I would be."
"Lizzie also knows better than to dwell on the worst aspects of a good situation," Mr. Turner warned.
"I've been assured several times from the station and shed masters that Lizzie will be perfectly fine until the snow melts enough for her to come home. That's the best we can hope for at this stage." The engines promised to pull out all the stops to make up for Lizzie's absence, but after Mr. Turner left, 4760 was still upset. She was told that trains didn't run on Christmas, so she was looking forward to spending the day with everyone. And even though Lizzie scared her sometimes, she still liked her and felt very sorry for her.
Hercule smiled down at her, letting off steam. "Lizzie's a very tough engine," he chortled. "She'll get through this just fine. It'll probably make a nice change from having to listen to us natter on all the time. She never did like us keeping her up at night."
"Do you remember one Christmas a few years ago where she had that awful foul temper and went to sleep in the wagon shed?" Louise tittered. "She wouldn't speak to us for quite some time."
"I may have pushed poor old Lizzie a little far that year," Hercule chuckled, abashed. "It were a good laugh, though."
"You certainly have no sense of humility," Duchess chided, but she smiled broadly. Hercule chortled, and the banter continued in that vein for the rest of the evening. It seemed the perfect backdrop for the engines to laugh in good spirits, in a well-lit, warm shed, as the snow began to fall once more. In Nottingham, however, it was a rather different scene. Only a few lights were lit around the yard, leaving the sheds mostly dark. The majority of the engines there were fast asleep, so the place was largely quiet. Lizzie stared up at the fat flakes of snow, feeling rather morose. This year, Christmas had not been especially kind to her. She'd never admit it, but she'd always secretly enjoyed this time of year, for one very special reason. Newton Abbot was her home, and even though characters came and went, it was familiar to her. The 43XX had been situated at Newton all her life after she returned, and she'd had no desire to be anywhere else. Of course, her work took her everywhere, but she always revelled in coming home and relaxing her tired wheels. The others were annoying at times, Hercule and Louise in particular, but everyone else was civil and largely left her be. Here, even though no one bothered her, they still shot her dirty looks and talked about her when she couldn't see them. There was a sense of every engine for themselves, none of the charitable atmosphere that was commonplace on the Great Western. Lizzie also noted that those who shot her dirty looks were clean express engines or small shunters. One group was obviously jealous because she got to go somewhere, and the other was jealous because she actually did important work rather than ferry people around like cattle. Also, Lizzie liked to think. Sodom, she said to herself, and felt a smile creep on her face. Sod who? Lizzie started at the voice. A small shunter looked up at her, his eyes wide. The freight engine snorted. All of you lot, she grouched. Why? Because you're all LMS and you're all no good. Now get out of here. Well, what makes you say that then? Pretty tough, aren't you? Lizzie grunted. I've heard you lot spout nonsense about me. Don't think I can't take a hint. You don't get engines talking drivel about each other back home. It only happens up north, doesn't it? Well, if they're all as rude as you are, it'd be hard to tell what drivel is, the shunter said, rolling his eyes. I didn't ask to be stuck here, Lizzie hissed. I never asked to go and pull one of your pathetic lot out of the snow and get stranded up here, did I? I never wanted to be away from home for Christmas, so as far as I give a hoot, you can all just leave me alone in peace. The shunter went quiet for a moment and stared intently at Lizzie. He took in her dirty black paint and weathered face, wincing a little at the huge scar across it, before holding eye contact, sensing not all was right. Lizzie scowled at him, but the shunter seemed fascinated and continued gulping at her. The Western engine harumphed loudly to try and scare him off. So you LMS engines like staring. Will you get out of here? You're lonely. Eh? Lizzie was a little taken aback. You act like nothing bothers you, but it does, doesn't it? The shunter carried on talking. It sort of makes sense in a way, you know. Engines aren't that much different across the border, it seems. Lizzie stared at him. What are you chuntering on about? She said at last. The shunter smiled, a knowing but sort of kind smile, and said, Common shunter I may be, but I've talked and met with many an engine, and it doesn't take too much to tell when an engine's alone in the yard, despite being surrounded by engines. That feeling of isolation's as plain as the worn paint on your boiler. Lizzie made an uncomfortable noise and looked away. The shunter tried to gauge the freight engine's reaction, but couldn't quite manage it. Lizzie finally spoke. Then leave me be, will you? I want to be alone with my troubles. The shunter narrowed his brow for a brief moment, not budging from the spot, and the snow danced between his frames. Care to look at me and say that, dear? He asked. Lizzie glared directly at the shunter and drew herself up as tall as she could. She spoke clearly, with venom lining her words. I've asked you to leave me alone. If I'm going to be stuck in bloody Nottingham or wherever the hell I am, then I'm going to be left in peace and quiet. I don't want any prying LMS engines bothering me, and I certainly don't want them sticking their grubby little noses into my business. Now will you kindly go away? The engine said nothing. He didn't say anything for the longest time. He just continued to stare. The Westerner was feeling seriously uncomfortable, to say the least, but her stare wasn't one of disgust or loathing or anything like that. The shunter moved off, his worn side rods knocking and clanking on the crank pins. Then he stopped. Lizzie watched as the engine's crew jumped down from the cab, changed the points, and the engine reversed back down onto the shed road next to her, before she had the chance to tell the engine to fall into a smelting pit, he spoke the final words of the evening. You may not want someone, but you clearly need someone here. Well, good night, Westerner, and a happy Christmas to you. Lizzie could only stare in utter disbelief. Why a common LMS shunter wanted to share the same shed as her was beyond imagining. The very idea was enough to make her think about taking off back down the line to Newton Abbot and Great Western Territory. Wait a moment, she suddenly thought. Aren't Duchess and 4760 LMS engines too? Lizzie decided not to speak out in the end. She had quite a lot of things she needed to think about before she came home. Hi everybody, this is Butterfly Coffee with a very quick message here. I've not been very active this year. I have sort of explained it very badly, so I'm going to explain it once for all here. I've been at university for the past 2 years studying animation, which is a highly practical subject. So I'm in a studio a lot, and it detracts from a lot of personal time I have. So sadly, I can't write as much NAS as I want. I can't voice act for people as much as I want to, so I have to put it off. And it's not cool. It's not cool at all, and I don't like it, and I'm very sorry. But I just want to take this opportunity now to say despite all my misgivings, it seems that this channel still continues to attract people. I mean, I still keep getting subscribers, and for those of you who do join me, expecting to see new content all the time, I'm sorry to have to break it to you, but you're not. I simply don't have the time for things like that at the moment. Usually on my breaks I do. I have the Christmas break, I have an Easter break, and I have a summer break. So you can expect content during then, and if you want to find out when those are, either find me through Facebook or DeviantArt or Tumblr. I'm far more active on those sites. I'll pop links in the description when this video gets uploaded so you can find me wherever I am there. For the old subscribers who have stuck with me, I really don't know what to say apart from thank you. Thank you all for being so patient and understanding, and just not expecting very much, knowing that I do have a personal life outside of YouTube. It's comforting to know that people do sort of stick around occasionally. So thank you all so much. Outside of that, I really have nothing else to say, apart from I will continue to keep making Newton Abbot Saga stories. I enjoy them very, very much, and I do want to keep writing and voice acting because I really appreciate those outlets, and even though they don't come around so often, I really do enjoy them for what they are, and I really enjoy the pleasure that I get from them. So I will keep doing Newton Abbot Saga stories, so thank you so much for sticking around and listening to those, or just exploring any of the older content that I have on here. I've archived a lot of my older content, so you're free to look at that. And the only other thing I have left to say is have a very, very Merry Christmas, and I wish you a happy and healthy 2016. Who knows what the future may bring us, and I hope to catch you then. So, there we go, I suppose. Goodbye, everyone. I'll catch you sooner or later. I hope. Goodbye.